unmute yourself and ask a POI. Cool. Starting on a self reverse count of 3, 2, and 1. Panel will prove to you like a couple of things in this debate. One, what firstly on framing of like what does this opening up of this economy will look like. Second, on why this like Wakanda, like when it goes ahead and lets go of its isolationist policy, it will not like become a dictator, like a bad radical power per se, or like even if it becomes that, why it's still going to be good for the world from t is equal to 0. And thirdly, why it's going to be good for small nations. Firstly, let's talk about like if like it opens up its economy, what it's going to look like. I think one, when you go and like open up Wakanda's economy, when you go ahead and win, which means that you like increase one, a lot of trade and investment at all points in time, which looks like you have a lot of global market access to begin with. What this looks like is like Wakanda could be like begin trading vibranium and other advanced technologies with like multiple other nations, which goes and like positions itself as like a like player in like a key player in the global markets, which means that you like now have like better access to like this like a lot of tech like other sort of trade investment that other goods that Wakanda has in the like global market. But B, by opening up, Wakanda attracts like multiple foreign investments in like various sectors, which means you can go and like invest here from like technology to agriculture, which ultimately leads to like a lot of economic growth and all of these things. Second is on development of infrastructure, etc. We think then like the sort of like increased economic activity when you let go of isolationist policies, it leads to like substantial other investments in like other sorts of sectors like transportation, communication, and all of these things. Which means like you can at all points in time you go and like increase the connectivity both within and outside Wakanda. Third is like you like this like within Wakanda and like other nations, you have like more contact, more trade, etc. You go and like collaborate with like multiple foreign companies, and you like collaborate with like a lot of like technology, etc. to begin with, like the transparent skills and all of these things. But more on like you still have a lot of like job creation, employments, and all of these things happening, cultural exchange happening, and all of these things. We think then the most important like the tipping point of this debate becomes is like where you're able to like go ahead and like counter other like radical nations and like empower smaller nations to begin with. Coming on to that later, but like let's talk more about on like why you go and like share technology with like these other nations and like what this global market access looks like. We think one, Wakanda can at all points in time go ahead and like have like multiple trade agreements with multiple countries. You can still like be a key supplier of vibranium, which means like other countries can like go and like biotechnologies and all of these things. You can like have a lot of like exchange happening. But second, the idea of like exporting vibranium, etc., you can like still go and like leverage this unique resource and become like a major like player in the other countries in the global market to begin with. Thirdly, on like where you can still have like diverse product ranges, etc. to begin with. On like you can have like multiple other products with regards to this. Let's come talk about like why Wakanda is like going to like act as a good actor and will not become a dictator nation. And like even if it becomes one, why it's still going to be good for the world from t is equal to 0. Why Wakanda like will not do it in a bad way is one, on the ideas of like cultural values, simply because of the emphasis on community that is there in Wakanda and of itself, which means like a Wakandan culture traditional has a lot of like value placed on like tradition, etc. to begin with, which means that like there's a lot of like community and consensus which people like place a lot of value to it, which means that like, even like under like a strong leader like Killmonger, there are like multiple other societal pressures to like maintain like principles like democracy and like public like engagement and things like that. Second is by like multiple points of internal checks and balances existing, which is Wakanda has historically had like a lot of tribal leaders to begin with, which means the system like goes ahead and checks like has placed checks and balances on Killmonger's power, which means we encourage like a lot of more like inclusive approach to like approach governance there, which means you have internal checks and balances at all points. We don't want to like ruin your optics as a nation who is just opening up in the global market. But third, you have like commitment to justice to begin with, which means Killmonger has a vision, right? Which means you like include like which includes like empowering like oppressed nations and communities, which means you like might not want to like go ahead and like pursue things like dictatorial tactics, which means like you need to maintain and support like the global population, and like you want the optics to be good around your nation who's just opening up and not be seen as like what we see as not going the status quo. But fourth, but you're still going to have like international community and global like scrutiny and backlash if you go ahead and do it in a bad way, is because when you go and open it up to the world, the international scrutiny and pressure will drive you into like doing like things in a good way because you don't want to be like seen as a bad nation, which means that you incentivize like a little more like transparent and accountable governance model within it. But fifth is like on like potentiality of like reform and all of these things. We think that Killmonger like at all points in time recognizes like the benefits of maintaining a level of democracy, which means that you go ahead and like be like more reform oriented to begin with. We think then you don't want like Wakanda to like emerge as like Wakanda will not go ahead at any point and act as a bad actor when you go and like let go of this isolationist policies. But even if like Wakanda like becomes like with the sort of technology they have a little more powerful than the other nations in the status quo, why it's still going to be good for the world? One, we think you have like counterbalance to authoritarian powers in the status quo with other countries, which looks like A, you have a lot of strong leadership because the powerful Wakanda leader who like goes and acts as a counterbalance from the beginning to like counter other authoritarian regimes, which will go and like promote stability in regions which like affected by tyranny and oppression. B, we think then there's a lot of deterrence against the sort of aggression in the status quo, which means the sort of like advanced technology and military capabilities that Wakanda then has, you can go and like deter aggressive actions from other nations, which leads to like impact being lesser wars and like lesser conflicts existing in of itself. Second, why is like going to be good for the world is sort of like promotion of stability in like countries where there's a lot of like countries who's just been out of colonialism and things like that. Which means you can go and like focus on like giving resources to like supporting smaller oppressed nations with them like to empower these particular populations. We think then the sort of leadership role that you like still can have is on a global scale is like you can still go and like set an example to begin with. We think then the sort of like economic development you then could have is like you channel these resources to like neighboring nations, which means you like improve their economics and stability, and you can still like have good trade relations and like be like it's a win-win situation for everybody. We think then the sort of the likelihoods of like why it's going to be good for the small nation, etc. to begin with. We think one, the sort of access to advanced technology. What's the likelihood that these like this country is going to go, like Wakanda is going to go and share technology or like shares like export some sort of like this particular element with other nations is because you want like small nations like gain access to this advanced technology, which means you like enhance the sort of like investment in like multiple other sectors, etc., to like have like your to empower local workforces in and of itself. The second reason is like you go and like have economic support. Before moving on, oh, sorry, my bad. So on economic support and investment, then we think then for these smaller nations, you can and what the comparative on OG and what's the clash we set up here is when you go ahead in a world where Killmonger becomes a leader, you at all points in time you go ahead and like have like you can go like do it in a good way, and you can empower these smaller nations like these smaller nations in the status quo to begin with. For all those reasons, proud to propose.
I would like to thank Prime Minister for that fine speech. Just a reminder for the room to finish your speeches by 7:15 and also to engage with POIs. With that being said, I would like to call upon Leader of Op to start a case for opening opposition. Here.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, cool. So my timer starts in 3, 2, 1. The way opening opposition is going to win this debate is going to talk about why, for example, maintaining the status quo is going to make you the maximization of the stability, which is the most certain and the hugest impact in this round. Before that, I would like to have a couple of responses, right? Because the main case coming from the opening government is after they open up, they will provide, for example, technology to other small nations and thus have a counterbalance toward the authoritarian government to begin with. There are 3 responses to this. Firstly, I don't think that is true because the reason for that is because one, after you open your countries, oftentimes because there's information asymmetry over, for instance, to what degree the weapon you have, oftentimes other countries do not know what weapons you have and you don't know what weapons they have, right? There's information asymmetry, which means that countries oftentimes feel quite threatened. For instance, that is the reason, for example, when there's information asymmetry, it causes the conflict increases in a way that everyone is feeling being threatened. And then when they, for example, release a hostile attitude, you feel like they're threatening you. So which means that you are going to hold a hostile attitude towards them as well. But secondly, oftentimes you are going to fight for other like market, as the opening government admits that, for example, you're going to fight for different markets for you to dump or your own products, which means necessarily you're going to going to cause a lot of the conflicts to begin with. But thirdly, I think that if you just take a look at the Infoslide, like the Wakanda is never a democracy. I don't know where the value of democracy at their side of the house come from, but whether we're going to argue that, for example, that it's more likely to be an authoritarian government, considering the fact that they already, for example, have kings. After you murder like the people person, probably you're not going to form a democracy because you want to hold the power, right? So at worst, it threatens the democracy because you are introducing a large power of the authoritarian government. At best, the impact, all of the impact is quite uncertain, and there are no incentive for them to directly provide the weapons to small countries.
UI.
And I think it's a very weak argument. So why do we think that at our side house they're going to maximize the stability, and why do we think that it outweighs the economic benefit that might appear at their side house? Firstly, why it is unlikely to be stable at the government's world, right? Number one, I think that Killmonger himself is a very cruel actor to begin with, right? He is considering that because this is not, for example, a democracy, oftentimes the way that they, for example, to throw up the current king is to directly murder them, right? Which means that oftentimes the Killmonger itself is quite a cruel actor. And even if it is not the case, after, for example, he get the position of being a king, there's massive work that needs to be done. For example, if he want to take the position, he need to kill a lot of the people who are quite close with the previous king, and this is not necessarily going to cause a lot of the conflicts, cause a lot of instability, because you're killing the whole network of this king to begin with. This is going to cause a lot of internal division. But secondly, oftentimes you're
UI.
likely to become the tyrant because the way that you go on the stage is through the violent means, right? Oftentimes means that you are unsure about whether or not you are going to be thrown up by the similar ways that other people might have, like violent means to make you step down, right? So which means that you're going to be constantly suspicious of other people, which necessarily going to make them more suspicious and cause more tyranny. But thirdly, when you are actually taking the position, oftentimes you need to clean a lot of the wings that the supporters of the previous kings, oftentimes necessarily going to create a power vacuum that is going to cause a lot of the chaos. But fourthly, like Wakanda themselves is a kind of like highly developed technology. Highly developed technology, which means that they have high-tech weapons, and there's likely, for example, when there is internal divide, when there's conflict, there's a risk that the weapon get misused, and there's going to be a large scale of impact in terms of hurting the group of people, right? But also, even if we buy the best case at the gov, at best, this person is just lack of the experience of government. They don't have, for example, their father talking to them how to rule the country. I don't think they have the experience to govern. Oftentimes, it's going to create, for example, economic crises or things like that, right? So, secondly, why do people care so much about the stability at our side house? Firstly, I think that people generally care about stability because it ensures the security and the economic development, right? It's like security is a prerequisite for people to express other rights. For example, your right to go for education, your right to just move around is just based on the premise that you feel like you're quite safe, you feel like you're secured in this nation, right? But secondarily, right, oftentimes people also care about the economic situation around them, which necessarily mean that they care about the economic development. When there is security, necessarily there's going to be more incentive for business to at least for internal business to thrive in a way that they perceive this environment as being safe. I think that's generally going to be helpful in the long-term development of the economy. But also, stability also means that it is the narrative that surround the people in this nation, right? It is the education that receive on the daily basis. For example, it looks like there is going to be education that make people feel proud about, for example, their isolation, right? Emphasize on, for example, how they should be proud of themselves, how they become successful even without the integration of the global of the globe, right? Oftentimes emphasize how they can develop on their own, and emphasize, for example, how they can be self-sufficient sufficient to begin with. But oftentimes it looks like they're also going to emphasize on the continuity of the culture, right? This culture itself has not been disrupted by any other things, right? But any other culture, which necessarily means that this stability oftentimes leads to a pride of the culture they have, oftentimes mean to how the people at the nation recognize themselves and necessarily regard to what their identity is to begin with, right? But oftentimes security also means that people generally can make long-term planning in a way that they feel
No, notice that the info slide, like they tell us, we shouldn't infer from this sort of things. in the first place. Not
developed like technology to begin with. Bit unsure, for example, how this marginal economic benefit, how the economic benefit is going to be very impactful, versus it is the identity, it is the feeling of being safe, it is a feeling of being secure. Oftentimes, it's just a huge impact that you should consider. But secondly, it's oftentimes a very certain impact, right? Because at their side of the house, it is still likely, for example, that you are going to be outcompeted by other things, right? Other market, like other competitors. It is unsure that whether or not you will get the advantage or not, but versus the security.
Hello. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Really sorry for the delay. Uh, cool. Am I audible and visible now?
Yes to both.
Perfect. Uh, Hello, my name is Vishesh. I'll be going as DPM. Just a quick shout out that this is my first international like ESL final, so I'm very happy. Yeah. Starting my speech, myself count down. Uh, 3, 2, 1. O's case only unlocks when Wakanda and specifically Killmongers enters into this organized society, organized globalized world in a bad manner, and they start just fighting with each other and they start making conflicts. If we frame out this, I don't think so. Their case unlocks, and this is what Pratyaksha preemptively does in her PM, and he gives you multiple mechanisms which are all accountable, which can keep Wakandas accountable for not doing so. One, in terms of international actors still being there, in terms of UN, WHO, other kind of bodies, which most of the countries obliged by it. Second, in terms of if Wakanda wants to conflict with any other country, they also have to face repercussions and retaliations on their own people. But note, Wakanda is a country which is kind of more like culturally homogenized and unified in terms of they care about the people and of itself. But if it is a king who is probably dictating most of and representing the voice of these kind of people, is likely going to listen to a lot of people. But no, this is what they say here. They say that king is likely going to be a bad king because he fought with the previous king. This is not how it works, because most of the way this kind of regime shifts in Wakanda is contingent upon a fight or a physical fight between both of the kings, and the result of that fight has to be kind of conceded, has to be conceded by most amount of people who are living there, and this is how most amount of authoritarian shift works as well. Even in China, when even when Kim Jong Un's father dies and Kim Jong Un becomes the leader, I don't think so. People just suddenly starts hating on Kim Jong Un, because that's just how transitional shift happens in most amount of monarchical kind of regime. That's the reason why Wakanda won't do it in a bad manner and why King would likely listen to you. But also, there are multiple reasons why actually the King Killmonger cares about his people and cares about specifically the marginal countries of Earth or this world as well. One, because of the voices, because of the inequality which this country has faced. And that is the reason why they want to start this revolution as well. Because they think that the whole overall country have oppressed us and don't know our power, and they think that we are the superior one, and that's the reason why they can suppress us to any of the to the fullest extent. This is not true, because we are also powerful, because we have vibranium in and of itself. This is not a repulsive action which they'll do, but they are probably going to relate with other kind of countries who does not have this capacity, such as probably countries in South Africa is something which they relate to, because they are often suppressed by Western countries and European countries in terms of polarization and other kind of things. This relatability factor is important because this lets them unlock collectivization within when we look into our side of the world. Second, in terms of in promotion equality and like fighting disparities to a larger degree, because that principle which Killmongers like operate upon, the way they want to globalize with, like the way they want to engage with this world, is has to be in the basis of like abolishing all kind of inequalities in through which the people who are at power or countries who are powerful and have a lot of capital can just manipulate or like can just deteriorate the people countries which are poor in of itself. This is the reason, but the core principle of Killmonger and the incentive of Killmonger is to show that we are also powerful and we are also someone who has a power and we are not the suppressed one. We can be the one who should be looked equally by other countries. This is the first frame which knocks out of this debate. Second thing which I want to specifically talk about is simply why it is better for the world. One, in terms of just like decreasing disparities, which is prevailing in the current status quo. Why is that? Vast amount of capital is concentrated in the hands of US, UK, this tier one country, because of the virtue that they had the first mover advantage of like like making getting the independence in the very first place. Second, by them doing atrocities on other kind of countries such as colonization and extracting all the resources which other countries had to their own country. Third, in terms of them able to like advance these like make this kind of technology in the prior basis, all of these things were happened by luck and by coincidence. This is not something which they pray for. This is not something which they like probably worked hard upon, specifically the Western and UK countries, because natural resources abundant was there, etc., etc. At this point of time, these countries have been a lot of like have gotten a lot of power asymmetry within the globalized world in and of itself. This means that there is an inherent disparity amongst all of the countries in the status quo. How does specifically Wakanda helps it and solve this kind of problem? And this also fulfills a principle of equality for all amongst the country. Note, most amount of countries, specifically in South Africa or some parts of countries of Asia, are deprived, like are severely deprived of poverty and does not have money to even circulate upon. This also stems and this also like leads them to internal conflicts, gang violence, etc., happen, which also violates human dignity to a fullest extent. Meaning that any amount of capital which could be provided to these people, which could actually put food onto the people's table, is something which is a net positive which you provide. Why is Killmonger likely going to do it? One, because of the already framing of like glorifying the oppressed one mindset which Killmonger has, but also because of the trade mechanism which Pratyaksha gives you. This means that you have to trade your vibranium with other kind of countries in order to get some amount of money through which you can do import, export, and other kind of capital for which are beneficial for your own country. But note, vibranium essentially is a material which is specifically very important. Why? Because one, this is unique. This is only present in Wakanda. It is not present in any other country. Second, in terms of why, it is very, very high techy. And as the world is slowly digitalizing and modernizing, this the essential technology is the most important thing in solving the biggest things which we can achieve as a humanity, such as going on to moon, such as probably building more better, faster computers, etc., etc. Human beings are just dependent on technology to a fullest extent. Before I move on, see you have anything?
Even if isolationist is good, Killmonger will just do it terribly because of who he is.
No, I've just already framed out why Killmonger is a nice dude. Cool. Moving on. That means that most amount of problems which are faced by these kind of poorer countries are likely going to be solved because of a trade mechanism. Why is this important? One, because specifically the importance of vibranium through like it covering it matching with the modernization, which is the world is and humanity is going to a larger degree, it aligns with them. This essential places Wakanda as a very key actor and the key country within geopolitical scenarios. Why? Because of the vibranium which they have. This also counterbalance other kind of big powers who are exploiting their own leverage within these kind of world organizations such as UN and WHO, which are justifying their more immoral action which they do in the name of like upholding democratic principles, like USA does, and probably when they exploited Iran, Afghanistan, etc., but also when probably USA supports Israel in the names of they are just protecting their sovereignty, but where the truth value is that they are literally killing people on the grounds of other country and of itself. This is something which USA and like these European countries do and like defend themselves because of the leverage which they have in terms of being the global power in the pure absoluteness. Wakanda as a country which can actually be the voices of the most marginal communities and the countries of this old world is something which can be a counterbalance. For all the reasons, proud to propose.
I would like to thank Deputy Prime Minister for that fine speech, and I would like to call upon Deputy Leader of OP to continue with the case for opening opposition. Hear, hear.
Okay. Hi, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, for PI after 5 minutes, thank you so much. So my speech will start in 3, 2, 1. Before our unique extension to general response to OG's cases, the first things OG talk about is under the advanced technology, they can maximize the resources or the benefits for the for this kind of particular country. There are 3 responses where we actually flip their cases, because it's oftentimes they just assume that other kind of countries or other nations have good incentive to use the resources well that can give benefits to the Wakanda. That is untrue, because first of all, noticing the resources is really incredibly valuable, meaning that other kind of like capitalism or other kind of countries, they're seeing the potential benefits that coming from this kind of resources is more likely under this kind of analysis having more incentive to doing the manipulation of the resources. But second of all, we're thinking that we're thinking like sharing technology or the advanced technology doesn't mean that you have equal sharing resources, because of the interest clash, because different kind of countries having their own political or economic priorities. It oftentimes looks like even under check and balance or under counterbalance, those kind of like privileged countries or other kind of powerful countries were still using their privileged power to doing the manipulation or doing unequal treatment or unequal investment towards Wakanda. They never prove you why in their city house they can these kind of other kind of country can having the incentive to helping or to sharing the resources to the Wakanda. Even if in the society, like some powerful country, if they're holding some very powerful military power, they actually don't have the incentive to doing this kind of things. They were directly or inherently like doing this kind of unequal treatment with this kind of particular country who holding a unique resources that in this world. But however, what is like but also more importantly, we're thinking that they also argue about like these kind of actors, it is not a bad actors. We are going to give you 3 reasons to telling you why it's actually this kind of particular person have the incentive that we're doing this kind of bad things and leads to the conflicts. I think the biggest problem in OG's analysis is that the incentive analysis in OG is not comparative. Community pressure and other people's support also exists in our city house. They fail to prove you why this kind of particular person have an internal intention or like to doing the good things. The first reason we're thinking that is because the urgency of the empowerment that push this kind of Killmonger to doing very violent or very extreme way, that because he want to take control these kind of regimes. But and these kind of things lead to a very unique harm in Gulf War, because people will feel threatened, because at least because the harm or the sacrifice will still exist in their city house. They cannot assume this kind of revolution will be so ideally peaceful. But the second thing is that we think in this kind of particular Killmonger having awareness of a lot of backlash. They're noticing that the better way to like avoid the deterrence or to hold the authority is by a very powerful or by a much more violent way. For example, that the dictatorship, they can helping them to centralize the resources or centralize the political power, because they noting that there are a lot of pressure. This kind of dictatorship or other kind of violent way, it is in this kind of particular person's interest. But thirdly, we're thinking that the revolution way needs a more stronger opponents, because these kind of group of people want to have a more solid supporters, so they are more likely having incentive to doing very extreme way that giving threaten for the current citizens. But also, I want to add more things to this kind of response, is that we're actually telling you why people in the current status quo are very satisfied about this kind of like about the current regime under 4 reasons. Because first, on this kind of regime, they have already have a very mature development, have given enough resources, all these kind of benefits toward the citizens themselves. But second of all, is that people can also adjust this kind of society themselves, because they're seeing the visible benefits that are coming from the current regimes. And OG never prove you why in their city house the current regime is so sucks. But actually, we're thinking that the priority of the citizen is that they want to maintain the security. It's only in our city house, under this kind of consistency of the leadership, that can give people a sense of security, that can give people a trust of the governance. But thirdly, we're thinking that it's about the self-sufficiency. It's much more important than causing more violation under the responses I have already proven you already. But even if you don't buy any kind of the responses, we're thinking that these kind of things need a long process to change the structure of the system, and people need to have the adaptation. This kind of response flip OG's cases about they want to achieve this kind of long-term investment, because in the long term, the opportunity cost or the process cost will also like influence or affect the efficiency argument coming from government bench. But secondly, we think comparatively what is unique in our Senate House, because first, under this kind of current regimes, we have a better acknowledgement of experiences about the resources. The unique thing in this debate is not about like how much resources or how much counterbalance you have. It's about the authority of the resources, because even in Gulf Best case, this kind of treatment is about a win-win situation, because there are always like conflicts or always like interest clash in government side, but because of the authority of the resources, giving this kind of Wakanda a unique leverage power to maintain their leadership or to maintain their like special power in the society. That is to say, it's only in our Senate House. The most important thing is that how to maintain this kind of first-tier technology to giving people a comparative advantages in the world, because people don't want this kind of like large scale of the cake or the large scale of the economic growth. The people just want the stability. People just want to hold the power that in themselves, rather than just lose the unique power of this kind of technology in the Gulf side. But even if you don't buy this kind of extension, I will do the weighing. The weighing here is simple. Why we think stability matters in this debate, that's much more way over than the whole Gulf bench about the investment, about the economic growth. Because if both Senate houses have a competition for resources, what is stable or what is unique is about the invisible attachment under stability, under the consistency of the leadership, that giving people a sense of safety and people seeing the commitment coming from these kind of governments and giving them a much more stronger power to believe the culture they stay in. That is to say, it's only in our Senate house we're proving you the likelihood to increase the skill of the people that trust in the current regime. But second of all, we have to face the people's current urgency. We have already proven you the priority of this debate, priority of this kind of citizen is about they want to maintain the security. It's about people have already satisfied about the current regime. If you betray people's needs, that is to say, you just push moderate people or push citizens in your regimes away from the Gulf side. We've proven you why in our Senate house we feed the people's most urgent needs, and we're solving this kind of urgency metrics. But thirdly, we're thinking that we actually create a long-term growth, because Ray have explicitly telling you why only in our Senate house the stability is a prerequisite of any kind of economic growth. Because when other kind of countries seeing your Senate house have a very unstable regimes or unstable political issues, they also don't have an incentive to doing the counterbalance issues or doing treatment with you. It's only in our Senate house we are actually under the stability leads to the final impact about the government side. Very proud to oppose.
I would like to thank Deputy Leader of OP for that fine speech, reminder for the room to engage with POIs, and with that I would like to call upon member of GAP to start a case for closing government. Hear, hear.
I'd like to confirm, Jesse. I'd like to confirm if I'm both visible and audible.
You are, but like it is, how do you say, rotated kind of.
You can't see my face.
I mean, we can, but it's.
I think I'm against the light. Let me just change.
It's not about the light. It's about like rotation of the screen.
Oh, give me a second.
Now it's. Oh, yeah, this works.
Give me a second. Let me get my sheet sorted. All right, I'm very sorry. Just give me a few minutes to just, a few seconds to just get my sheets sorted out and. Camera. No, I need a timer. Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. I would like to confirm if I can still be heard and seen.
Yep, all good.
I'm very sorry for keeping you all waiting. I'm starting right now. Panel, we are going to win this debate on the most vulnerable actor and why we think that individual deserves emancipation. Panel, I think that to be born in a country, knowing very well that there are millions of people outside there, knowing that there is food out there for you to taste, knowing that there is music that you will most likely never hear, knowing very well that there's arts that you will most likely never see and touch, knowing that there are people that you will never see, knowing that you have no choice but to live in a country where the government is preventing you from interacting with anyone else because the country is unknown to anybody. We think that the average Wakandan citizen who has lived his entire life in a prison where he has no choice or determination of where he's going to go with his life or determine what he's going to do with his life, we think that on that particular actor, we think is most likely something that we think needs emancipation. We think that for that particular individual, cultural exchange, things like self-actualization, seeing things around him, that's most likely going to be important. Notice, because the motion says that Wakanda is technologically advanced more than any other country. It doesn't fiat that they have every single luxury in the world. It does not fiat that they have access to every single culture in the world, because it says that these individuals have actually secluded themselves from the rest of the world. It means that for cultural development, new food, new music, all these things, they lose out. The ability to travel to other countries and have better experiences, we think is worse in that particular world. In their world, worse quality of life, better, less of exchange and all these sort of things. The mental health of these people necessarily goes down the drain because they don't explore and experience all the things that give them the joys and all these sort of things in their life. They feel locked out, and the government is the one to blame for that particular sort of thing in the first place. Opposition cannot fear that these people simply want to stay in that particular country, no matter how comfortable it is, because people leave the Western world with all this comfort to come and stay in Ghana here with us in spite of all the electrical problems and mosquitoes and everything. They can't fear that. Let's move on. But no, let's ask ourselves on a particular principle. On what grounds do we think it's important for Wakanda to do these sort of things in the first place? We think that the reason why individuals were born in Wakanda in the first place was not because they are much better than any other human being that exists on the planet. It was basically because of the lottery of birth. You ended up being born somewhere in a particular regard, and you were lucky for that particular reason. We think that on that particular choice and on that particular principle, right, of the lottery of birth and how they literally don't deserve it for anything that they did. It's not literally because of any moral desert or anything that they did to deserve it. They got it simply because they were lucky. On principle, it's best for them to necessarily engage in a world where they actually help other people, especially in a world where that particular technology is life-changing. That technology could probably help millions of people in healthcare and all these sort of things in the first place. It is their responsibility to do that sort of thing in the first place because they are humans and other humans are dying and they can literally solve the problem. Out of that particular responsibility that comes from being a human and seeing other people suffering in that particular regard, the responsibility lies on Wakanda to do these sort of things in the first place. What's the relevance of this? Sharing that technology against that global revolution, changing the way people do things, influencing all these sort of things in the first place is a responsibility that lies on their head that's been given to them by epistemic access to these particular resources, right? They need to do something about it. Otherwise, they're being selfish, but that's an incredibly bad thing, especially when people are dying and we think that's a bad thing. This debate is about the third person neutral actor. That person literally engages so much benefit within that is something that they most likely get and are supposed to be benefiting from in that particular regard. Let's move on to the principle of self-defense. Notice the panel. Human beings are inherently curious, and the world is just so small. Wakanda might not have been might not be explored or seen or identified or seen right now, but inevitably, sometime in the future, it's going to be. This is the reason why it's extremely important and likely. Notice that we've seen people living in the heart of forest, the Maasai tribe, people living in the heart of the Amazonians have been identified. It's like that's the thing. It will one day be identified. This is the reason why that is important. Sooner or later, people are going to explore that particular land and find out Wakanda. At that point in time, they now have the responsibility of fending off those particular individuals. Even if they'll be successful, the cost that they incur in doing these sort of things in the first place is one that they don't most likely want to engage. We think it's proactive. And the one where you explore that, you open the walls and expose yourself to others. In a particular instance, you mark out your boundaries and then you prevent them from trooping in without your permission in that particular regard because they see you as a global actor with so much resources, so much power, and so much money. But let's show you why we are better than our opening. Opening's biggest claim is that, there's a strategic placement of Wakanda as a geopolitical actor. They don't prove the political will of Wakanda to do these sort of things in the first place. In the process of accruing global dominance, you step on so many toes, you make enemies, you steal resources, and all these sort of things in the first place. We think that in itself is extremely important because they don't prove that Wakanda is willing to do all these things and make enemies of so much places in the world, especially when they want to engage a global revolution. They want people to accept that sort of thing in the first place. Let's look at the opening analysis of Killmonger and why that is extremely bad. Notice the opposition cannot win today's debate because they fear that at the end of the day, Killmonger only is a despotic leader, just there to notice panel. Killmonger did not stage a coup d'etat. In a monarchy, the only way to challenge the hierarchy is when you have legitimate claim over that particular throne in the first place. What that means is that he's most likely entitled to challenge. That's why it's a legitimate thing. It means then it doesn't make him a dictator where he's going to end up going out there killing other people. It means also that he most likely has supporters. If their analysis that there will be conflict and they'll be using like vibranium technology to kill each other, then we can also claim that in the point where he loses and doesn't succeed, they will also most likely, his supporters most likely fight against each other's supporters. I don't think that can be something that you most likely fear in a particular regard. Nobody knows what his incentives are. Nobody knows like all these sort of things in the film. All we know is that he most likely wants to engage global revolution. I'll take that POI from opening.
So if the whole society is narrative, or for instance, the education you receive, the history book, is telling you should feel proud about your cultural continuity and how you should feel proud about how your country developed on your own, why still you feel you are...
Like, it's simple. Because of the basic human incentive to explore, find out new things, all these sort of things in the first place. That's why even though I love my Ghanaian culture, I want to study in Harvard sometime in the future. Like, I want to explore new things, meet people from Sweden. I want to experience all these things. It's a human incentive, like all these sort of things in a particular regard. Like culture isn't lost in that particular regard because at the end of the day, they still have that particular culture. They still respect it. They still want to experience new things in that particular regard. At the end of the day, we think that humans in and of themselves are curious. That's why the Wakandans want to explore and experience new things. It is not nice for them to reduce the quality of this individual's life in that particular regard. Finally, why is it most likely going to be a successful revolution? It's simply because they most likely take advantage of their vibranium technology. We think that's something that they have comparative advantage in and nobody can actually challenge them. But also, they influence things like change, healthcare, all these things. Incentive of the people to buy into what they are trying to create the revolution on. For all these reasons, we think Wakanda most likely is going to succeed in this revolution that is trying to pursue. Very proud to propose.
I would like to thank Member of GOV for that fine speech, and I would like to call upon Member of FOP to start a case for closing opposition. Hear, hear.
Am I audible? Great.
Yes, you are.
I'm going to start then in 3, 2, 1. Okay, panel 2. I will have 2 main points in my speech. First, I'm going to explain why the Killmonger winning would result in significant increase in global conflicts and not just in Wakanda, thereby by scale winning over our opening. And then if I have the time, I'm going to explain why internally T'Challa would just be a better leader than Killmonger, even if global conflict does not increase. First of all, a point of framing. Notice the comparative here is instead of Killmonger winning is T'Challa remaining king and probably doing basically the same thing his dad did, and Wakanda will stay an advanced, prosperous nation. I don't see why that would change. So oppositions have to prove like a very big increase for in quality of life to actually win on that case. And in addition, considering that I think our opening's internal conflict case still stands, I don't understand why people would care more about, oh, I want to be able to travel outside of Wakanda or hear American music, rather than I wish that my friends weren't shot in the Civil War. So I don't understand how CG's case here would win. So let's talk about global conflict. First of all, let's read like the last few words of the actual info slide saying that he wants a global revolution. Mind you, what does the global revolution actually mean? Now, we can uncharitably say that it is something that can be positive, like the Industrial Revolution or the like printing press or bullshit like that. However, it is unlikely that this is actually what is meant, since he's not an inventor. He is essentially a politician or some sort of rebel or potentially terrorist, right? So what it actually means is that Killmonger wants to enact some new type of hierarchical order, some new world order to make sure Wakanda isn't just isolated, but it's at the top of the food chain. Now, what that actually entails is not only revealing themselves to the world and actively trying to enter conflicts with other countries. Notice that, okay, one point of characterization about him is for him to actually want to usurp the king, he has to have has to either be very, very power hungry or be so very different from the king in like his politics to actually justify wanting to take such a drastic measure. Both of these would be enough to justify trying to go to war with Wakanda's surroundings, or like in general to try and dominate more of the world. And notice several things. One, Killmonger probably grew in Wakanda, and being so isolationist, he probably doesn't necessarily understand most of global politics or global warfare. It means that he doesn't know the actual ramifications of everything that he's doing, and since he wasn't raised to be a leader, unlike T'Challa, there's no way that he would have learned that. Given that, it makes it very likely that he might either, one, threaten a very powerful actor like the US or China or Russia, aggravate them for some reason because he wants to like be above them. For instance, if he sees in the US that the treatment of Black people is incredibly bad, which it is, and he concludes that the US is white supremacist, which kind of, it means that he will then want to enact revenge against the US, against its leaders, against its politicians, and would therefore probably start some sort of conflict against it. And that conflict is likely to be, to some degree, armed. Notice, to his knowledge, Wakanda has the best technology and best weapons technology in the world. Mind you, vibranium is a type of metal. It is not used mostly for medicine. It is more likely to be used for like actual tech and machinery, and most of all, weapons. It is very likely that Wakanda has very, very advanced weaponry and other military technology, because even if they didn't have direct conflict, they, one, would want to be prepared for the, oh, somebody finds a scenario that even CG could think of, then likely the king of Wakanda could think of as well. And two, they might have internal conflict. Some people might want to kill the king, like Killmonger. So they have more advanced weapons. So all that means that Killmonger is very, very likely to start some conflict between Wakanda and other countries. That is horrible for both countries because wars are bad. Lots of people die in them. It takes a lot of money. It's bad for the economy. However, notice even if all of that is untrue, even if he doesn't start a conflict directly between Wakanda and another country, he still doesn't understand global politics. He still doesn't understand how trade deals work. He still doesn't understand what selling weapons to a country actually means. And he's like, oh, we get a lot of money and they get our weapons. I don't care. He doesn't understand that by that, he took a side in the war between Ukraine and Russia and is now part of the axis of evil, as the West likes to call it, or things like that. It might mean that he gives, for instance, some bad actor like Russia, like China, like incredibly powerful weapons to use on very vulnerable populations and harm them in incredibly disproportionate ways. Imagine if someone existed in 1939 and gave Nazi Germany the atomic bomb because they didn't understand what's going on, right? Him not understanding those politics and having incredibly advanced weaponry is horrible for a global leader, and it is incredibly bad if that actually happens. Let's see. Right. So why would oh yeah, before I go on, I will take a POI from opening. Closing. I didn't get any engagement. I'm sorry.
Yeah, POI.
Yes.
Right. So this is the thing. You can't fiat that it will only be used for weaponry, because things like X-ray machines and all these things, even pills are made from metallic, these sort of things.
Okay, I get what you mean. You can say, oh, we can make more medical machines, but the thing is this, it is very likely to be used for weapons. Even if medical technologies exist, that does not preclude having better and better weapons. And even if Wakanda did not develop weapons with vibranium, which is incredibly likely, by selling vibranium, like technologically advanced countries can develop weapons with it, and it's likely to be stronger than whatever it is that other countries have. Right. So why would T'Challa be a better king, like internally, just in general? One, he was raised to be a king. He knows what it takes. He was with his dad all his life. He's likely to listen to his advisors, which Killmonger likely isn't. Killmonger, look, I know it's kind of stupid, but his name, it's not his given name. That's not what his parents called him. It's probably because he literally acted in a way that makes him a merchant of death. He's a bad person through and through, and it's very unlikely that he will be a good leader because of that. And look, the significant internal struggle doesn't necessarily mean that he killed the previous king, as oppositions or governments point out. It could mean he just won't listen to them and shuts them out of the new governance. And that alone means that the leadership completely changed and is completely unstable because of that. For all those reasons, please oppose.
I would like to thank member of OP for that fine speech, and I would like to call upon Government Whip to sum up the Gov bench inside of this debate. Hear, hear.
Okay, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, cool. Okay, so I'm just gonna start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, I think this debate is like pretty simple. And because it's a final, you just need one team. That team can't definitely be OG, it definitely can't be OO, and worst off, it just can't be CO. And I'm just gonna show you why. I think engaging OO within this debate is equally the same as engaging CO. They don't have any extension within the round, not on impact level, also not on mechanism. They just have a bunch of examples to prove to you why most likely war is going to happen and the like. The problem is this is a largely extremist case that does not take into comparison what the worst case and best case scenario can be, and why even in our best case scenario, is still an extremely detrimental world that you don't want to much more likely support or defend. I think we are going to explicitly show you. OO and CO want to chat about why we think there's going to be a lot of war that exists and the like. We think this is like really ridiculous to argue. Why? Because if the stems is to debate like globalization in the vast majority of instances, we think there's a huge reason as to why there exist policies, there exist treaties on things like nuclear weaponry because of like how deadly they can be, but also because of like the implication that they have. That means to that extent, the debate can't just largely also be about T'Challa being a good leader versus Killmonger and the like. I think this debate seeks to explicitly question the impact of what these people seek to implement in the vast majority of instances. This debate is largely a comparative of domestic protectionism versus globalization in the vast majority of instances and what this impact has on Wakanda. I think this is where Matthew's speech becomes explicitly important within this debate. What does Matthew tell you? Matthew chats to you about the principle of collective responsibility that exists. The mechanism he gives you is you need to understand that there is existence of random birth lottery. That means as individuals, we don't choose where we are born. We just like sort of say happen to be there. That means there is a global interconnectedness or a global village that exists in the vast majority of instances. This is a debate that the entire room takes consensus to when they want to argue the impacts of globalization versus domestic protectionism. And this is what we are going to extend on like within Whip's speech as well. We say because of that interconnectedness, there is a level of responsibility that sort of comes onto different nations. That means your exposure to the rest of the world does not eminently put you in harm's way. You already concede on off bench, right from OO to CO, on how these people have vibranium. This means they have the prior research, they have the prior access to strength and weaponry. People have less incentive to want to attack you, but more incentive to want to work with you, to expand things like research. We think even with nuclear weaponry, there is expansion of research, development of weapons and the like. What happens is there is a mitigatory measure that exists in order to have consensus and a level of peace. We think those things are extremely important. Some reason as to why even in the Russia-Ukraine war, you don't see Russia having nuclear weapons and attacking Ukraine. I think then this just goes to prove to you why there is a mitigatory measure that largely exists. I think with that response, we are able to show you why CO can't like win this particular debate and not even OO. But what does OG chat to you about, and why do we inherently rank above OG within this particular debate? I think we are able to show you in a vast majority of instances why there needs to exist alternatives for individuals. This is like a heavy burden for you as a leader to give people access to those things. CO says, oh, Why do these things even matter to human beings? You can't tell why they matter when they don't have the alternatives to actually choose from. It means then you lessen the impact and the importance of things like principles of choice and autonomy that exist. The stance of these particular principles is on your ability to give people alternatives to be able to choose from them. But if they don't have those alternatives, you're never really going to credibly assess whether these things are important to individuals or not. I think these are like important mechanisms that come within Matthew's speech that you're much more likely never able to like culminate within the debate. Also, I think there's like a huge like sort of setup on how we debate Infoslide motions. The problem with OO in the debate and CO is that they want to run to extrapolate things that are not within the Infoslide to inherently make it the burden of gov benches to defend within this round. In terms of the chat about democracy versus authoritarianism, we think that inherently is not the debate. The debate seeks to question whether you prioritize things like domestic protectionism or globalization, and why that inherently becomes important for Wakanda as a nation in the vast majority of instances. Then I think the other thing that we need to sort of like chat to you about within this debate is on the aspect of how you're able to sort of like create accessibility for these individuals in terms of culture diversity and the like. The thing is, with like domestic protectionism, what much more likely happens is even when there are biases within that particular society in terms of tradition and culture, you're never going to open up to understand why these things are bad to individuals in the vast majority of instances. Take, for instance, the conservativeness that exists within like the vast majority of African nations that has been demystified by the aspect of globalization. Say things like gender-based violence. Say things like on a vast majority of instances where you have like female circumcision and the like. There is like a very negative implication of certain traditional practices that goes unchecked because of like the general belief of like these particular things. The problem with that is you're never able to show why individuals like sort of say have alternatives within that stance. We are able to show you why, because of the presence of those particular alternatives, individuals are better able to like self-determine. But also for Wakanda, the aspect of self-determination comes even clearer because you're able to know on a global stance what you're able to prioritize and what you're able to achieve. But we think also for individuals, there is better self-actualization because you interface with alternatives. You're able to interface with like the most vital things that you need. I think what we are able to do for you from like CG is to show you why globalization in the vast majority of instances, or that opening up, becomes an important thing. One, in terms of the responsibility that exists because of the interconnectedness, but also two, we are able to mechanize why the random birth lottery stipulates the existence of these particular things. Three, I think on stakeholder analysis, Matthew tells you why these things are important, like for the most vulnerable stakeholders, which is the people within the state, and why they're able to have better sort of to say self-actualization, better self-determination, but why alternatives become extremely important to like individuals. They have a bigger burden to show you why these alternatives exist, but also if they don't exist, why they are not essentially important. You can't gauge that things are not important when you are unable to show why people don't need these particular things on the stance that they're able to choose from them. Never been more proud to propose. Here.
I would like to thank GovWhip for that fine speech. And yeah, a reminder, although not a huge one, given that it's the end of the debate, to engage with POIs. But yeah, I would like to call upon Opposition Whip to deliver the last speech of this debate. Here.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. First, a few external rebuttals, then basically how to win this debate by proving more words, and basically it's better than the status quo. And lastly, how to win the clash of is Wakanda is a good actor, which basically is the most crucial clash, as everything else depends on it. What I wanted to ask in a POI is, if Wakanda is so advanced and strong as we get in the info slide, why are they scared are they scared of backlash? Why are they scared of the USA? If you're the only one with an atom bomb in a world where everyone else have arrows and bows, you're probably not afraid of them. You're probably not afraid of backlash. So this means that this debate is also not about whether countries will agree or not to work on me, because we know that this country is much more advanced. Like the USA will grovel for the opportunity to get vibranium and be able to work with me. So I'm not sure what Siji's case is doing in this debate. And lastly, about the characterization that the debate isn't about Chala and Killmonger, but about their policies. Notice, if we're doing a debate about do we prefer Republicans or Democrats in the USA, don't tell me that Trump vs. Kamala and their personalities isn't a clash. This is just not how debate works. Okay. So, we just don't think that Wakanda is scared of backlash. And if, according to OG, like Killmonger wants to seem strong and scary, wants to glorify the oppressed, and was oppressed by white people in the USA, it's more likely what he'll want most is revenge. He'll want to start a war by himself. He'll want to be bad. He wouldn't want to help people around him because he's so angry, like OG say. But even if he does want to help, I'm not sure why we get all of their impact, right? They're talking about economy. It says now there will be global market. There'll be foreign investment. All of this is inside Wakanda because Wakanda has no incentive to bring to sell away the vibranium that it has, which is like the most pricey stuff that it has. So what they can do is like sell technology. I'm not sure how much it helps Wakanda, which is literally the strongest nation in the world. They still have standing is collaboration, which they assume will help countries around them, especially the weaker countries. But this is also wrong. Why? Because what's likely to happen is that the strongest countries, like the USA, like China, like Russia, these are the countries that will try to get this vibranium, that will try to get this technology. They will have the money to help. Not to help. They will have the money that will convince Wakanda to help them. Wakanda has no incentive to help the weaker people around them. They get no benefit from that. That means that OG don't really have impacts about the small countries. So we just think that vibranium, this is like a external rebuttal to both governments. We just don't think that vibranium is going to reach the weak countries. It is finite. It is very pricey. So basically what's going to happen is that it harms weaker countries because already today we have the USA helping countries in Africa. We have China building roads and building trains. But now if there's a new resource that they have to fight over, it's very likely that they'll put their focus on that in order to win, like, I guess, their adversary instead of helping the weaker countries. So we think it just makes their situation much worse. How do we win the debate? Please ask in chat. So basically, weigh the stability of the monarch above all else, right? First of all, it affects only the people of Wakanda, and also the economy growth that they prove affects only the people of Wakanda and not around countries. We affect on two levels all countries in the world, right? Either by less war or by the rebuttal that we just case about what is the likely alternative, right? Okay, so Owen already told you the comparative, basically, Chala winning means the status quo today. This means that the situation isn't so very bad, right? So only because we're trying to help after the colonialism and countries feel guilty and so on and so forth, which means that a change can only mean that the situation of the countries near Wakanda and the countries out of the big superpowers is only going to get worse. And we think that even the small likelihood of that is so harmful and so terrible that it's enough to win the debate. But let's see, how do we win that? By going to the clash of is Wakanda a good actor? Notice that this is by winning this, we are already above OG, because even if isolationism is bad, like they say, if Killmonger will do a terrible job at it, it's basically better. So if Killmonger will do a terrible job at it, it's better to stay isolationist. Right? They say checks and balances, but then they say that the incentive of Killmonger is to be strong and scary and glorify the oppressed, which seems to me like he wouldn't listen to his checks and balances. But Owen also analyzes to you why Chala is more likely to listen to these checks and balances, because he doesn't change all of the people, because he has advisors that he trusts them, because the advisors will actually want to work with him, and so on and so forth. The world backlash, I explained why it doesn't make a lot of sense. CGS, please engage.
Yeah, panel, the most vulnerable actors within today's debate are the citizens who have no option than to listen to what the government has to say for
I
them.
honestly don't think that the
Opt-out mechanism
citizens
with
of
better life.
Wakanda are the most oppressed group in this debate. They're like living the best life ever. And if you're talking about the citizens outside of Wakanda, then I have already explained why their situation isn't getting better, but is actually going to be getting worse. Let's weigh above OO. OO are saying generally, like, there's going to be a power vacuum, it will cause a mess, Killmonger will be violent to do it and kill Chala. They depended on Killmonger being violent and doing it worse. We're saying something more nuanced and basically proving our impacts better, right? We're saying, like, even if he tries to do his best, he literally can't understand the politics. He doesn't have the advisors and he's less likely to listen to them. He's very likely angry and will actually want to do harm. And even if he doesn't, he'll just by mistake support, I don't know, Russia over Ukraine and so on. So we still prove the same impact as OO, but in a more probable way, and therefore in a better way. And also our impacts are much better because they're talking only the effect of Wakanda, while we're talking about the effect of the whole world. With all of that, listen, Wakanda, led by Killmonger, will be a terrible player. Please, CO.
I would like to thank Opposition Web for that fine speech and all four teams for a lovely debate. You will probably receive the result certainly at the closing ceremony. So yeah, everyone is free to go now. Hopefully.
Thank you.